Hey guys, how's it going? Today we're going to be talking about 30 frames a second again, and I'm not really just here to make fun of 30 frames a second like I do in a lot of videos. I'm here to actually have a discussion about it, because I seen this video where a guy claims that 30 frames a second on console is smoother than 30 frames a second on PC. Now this is actually a very common thought held among people who play games. They think that 30 frames a second on console is for some reason smoother than PC. Which is just untrue, dude. Whether you play on 30 frames a second on your PC, your console, your Switch, your neighbor's butt plug, it doesn't matter. It's all 30 frames a second, it's the same level of smoothness. Now the only way it would actually be different is if the game is terribly optimized on one system so that the frame times are off or something like that, or you have different settings. Anyway, we're gonna get into this video where a guy tries to claim that 30 frames a second on console is smoother than PC.
Hey guys, welcome back to another video. So you have just got your hands on a super hot console game like God of War or Spider-Man.
I don't know, I definitely wouldn't call God of War or Spider-Man a hard game. I mean, when I think of a hard game, I think of something like Sekiro or something like that. I definitely don't think of Spider-Man or God of War where you can just put it on easy mode.
Hey guys, welcome back to another video. So you have just got your hands on a super hot console game like God of War or Spider-Man and like playing it thoroughly. So you thought to yourself, hey, maybe 30 FPS isn't that bad.
Yeah, we're definitely not thinking that, especially how these consoles were marketed to us, the world's most powerful console, frame rates we've never seen before. I mean, they literally came out and marketed these consoles as the second coming of Jesus, and yet here we are getting frame rates that we had 30 years ago. Also, we're especially not thinking 30 frames a second is quote-unquote not that bad when playing a hard game. The last thing you want in a hard game is a low frame rate, because that means more input lag. You need those interactions on your controller to register as quick as possible when playing something difficult. Take for example parry timing. The lower your frame rate is, the more delay there's going to be between you hitting that parry button and your character actually parrying. Therefore, it's going to be harder to parry on a lower frame rate.
All these console games felt much smooth and you did not feel any lag or jitters.
What? 30 FPS is the opposite of smooth, dude. It's choppy as shit, and you feel a lot of input lag on 30 frames a second. Actually double the amount of input lag you'd see at 60, and 4 times the amount of input lag you'd see at 120.
So you get back to your PC, start your favorite game, crank all the settings up to ultra, and crank your resolution to 4K and put a frame rate cap of 30.
I'm yet to meet a single PC player that would cap their frame rate to 30. Most people I know who play on PC, if they're getting a frame rate as low as 40 or whatever, they're cranking their graphics down and their frame rate up, not their graphics up and their frame rate down. In fact, I checked a lot of polls on the internet. Most people on PC are still playing in 1080p resolution. I have a 4K monitor, but I almost never play in 4K unless the game is able to keep a frame rate above 100. I use the 1440p setting, and it helps me get a better frame rate while still looking really good. I think it's criminal how these consoles just kinda skipped over 1440p. If these games aren't able to be handled at 4K 60, why not do 1440p 60? 1440p looks amazing, why are we skipping over it?
Hoping it would feel as the same smooth experience you just had on a console.
But if you were playing at 30 FPS, you weren't having a smooth experience. I mean, you could have had a fun experience, you could have enjoyed it. I'm not saying you can't enjoy playing games at 30 FPS, but let's not sit here and pretend like it was a smooth experience. I mean, we had games running at 60 FPS, 3D games running at 60 FPS back in the GameCube PS2 era. Even back then, 30 FPS wasn't considered a smooth experience.
But wait a second, this does not feel right, does it? The game feels laggy, jittery, and the overall experience is quite bad.
I mean, yeah, that kinda sounds like 30 FPS to me, a laggy, choppy experience. Once again, that doesn't mean you can't enjoy the game, but let's not pretend like it's smooth. Bloodborne is one of my favorite games of all time, but it's choppy as fuck.
You think to yourself that console 30 FPS was so much better than this mess, and you would be right, absolutely right.
Nah, dude, you'd be fucking wrong. I mean, you're playing at the same frame rate on both systems, so you're getting the same level of smoothness. And you're gonna show it side by side here in a minute, and I'm gonna slow it down to prove that it's the exact same level of smoothness. Now, you might have had a smoother experience on your console rather than your PC for a variety of different reasons. First of all, your settings. Second of all, how powerful is your PC? Can your PC really handle 4K 30, or is it, dropping frames now and then? What's your frame time like? Do you have a bottleneck, etc, etc?
The console gameplay definitely looks much smoother than the PC version.
No it doesn't. I looked at the side-by-side you have there, it does not look smoother on the console rather than the PC. First of all, they both look the same in terms of smoothness, and second of all, the console version just looks blurry as shit due to motion blur, which is something we're gonna talk about later. If you don't believe me, I'm gonna go ahead and slow down the gameplay and put it side by side here and let you guys decide for yourselves. Do you think it looks smoother on the console rather than the PC, or does it just look blurrier? Alright, here's your side by side. You can see the frames move at literally the exact same time. Also, the game just looks fucking blurry on the Xbox. That's not smoothness. Also, I forgot to mention the fact that the PC version is running at an actual 4K, whereas the Xbox One X version is running at an upscaled 4K, so one is literally 1080p 30 and the other is a real 4K 30, neither of which being very great.
Why does 30 FPS on a console is such a better experience than 30 FPS on a PC?
It isn't a better experience on console, it's literally the same thing. The only way it's a better experience on console is if you fucked up your settings or you got like an unoptimized piece of shit game on your hand.
Well, this question can be answered with three main reasons. Our first and foremost reason is the implementation of motion blur.
Can I be honest? Fuck motion blur. I hate that shit so much. It just makes your game feel like nauseating to look at, and the fact that you can't disable it for a lot of games is criminal. But let me go ahead and tell you why they use motion blur and why they don't let you disable motion blur. Motion blur can hide the fact that a game doesn't look very smooth. You take a low frame rate game and rotate your camera around without motion blur, you're going to be able to tell very quickly that the game is running at a bad frame rate. But if you stick motion blur in the game, it might kinda hide the fact that the game's running at a bad frame rate and the casual players might just fall for it. I mean, why do you think motion blur gets implemented in so many games with bad frame rates, especially during like the Xbox One/PS4 generation? It's because performance during that generation was awful. So many games were running at 30 and sub 30 FPS, and they didn't want people realizing games haven't gotten any smoother over the past 30 years. And this worked on me. I didn't realize that games weren't getting any smoother because they had motion blur to hide it. But now that I'm older and I understand more about games, I know what they're doing and I think it's incredibly scummy.
Motion blur is the technique of imitating a human viewing experience. When we move our eyes rapidly from one object to another, our vision becomes a little blurred in between. This technique is heavily used in console games. When motion blur is in effect, the transition from one frame to another or one object to another is way more smooth than when it is not in effect.
Yeah, I wouldn't really sit here and argue that making the game blurry as shit whenever you move your camera makes the game more smooth. I think it's more annoying than anything, especially in like first-person shooters where I'm struggling to see the enemy because of this stupid fucking realism bullshit. I mean, damn, if I wanted realism in a first-person shooter or something, I'd nut up and join the goddamn army. Also, to sit here and argue that this is why console feels smoother than PC at 30 FPS is stupid, because you can literally turn this on PC as well, but most people turn it off because they see it for what it really is, just a way to hide unsmooth games.
Console games use heavy doses of motion blur to create a sense of smoothness in their games.
No, they implement it to hide the fact that the games haven't gotten any smoother over the past 30 years.
Now most PC games also has this option in the graphics settings, but we tend to turn this off generally.
So it's not smoother feeling on console because it's literally the exact same thing on PC, except the only difference is you can turn off this setting. This is like saying that console games look better than PC games because PC gamers tend to go in and turn their graphics down for higher frame rates in competitive games.
Because many people, including me, feel a certain kind of dizziness with motion blur on PC because we are sitting so close to the screen. Whereas this dizziness factor does not come into play on consoles because you are at a considerable distance from your screen.
Yeah, and that's just completely untrue. Not everybody on PC likes to sit right next to their monitor, just like how everyone on console doesn't like to sit far away from their monitor. I mean, I'm a perfect example of this. I have my PC and my console right next to each other. I have like the L-shaped desk, and I like to sit right next to my console monitor and my PC monitor. When I sit close to my monitor and I'm forced to use motion blur on a console game, it makes me sick, like it makes me feel dizzy. Adding some dumbass fucking blurring to your game does not make it a smoother game or a smoother feeling game. It simply hides the fact that the game looks unsmooth, and if you're not that like into gaming or whatever, you might not notice it.
Console developers keep this fact in mind while developing their games for console. So by careful and effective use of motion blur, they make the game look and feel much smoother even at 30 FPS.
Once again, I'd argue that just making your game look extremely blurry doesn't actually make it feel or look smoother. It's simply annoying and it hides shitty textures and stuff. Also, once again, console games are not smoother because of motion blur because you literally have motion blur on PC, just most of us turn it off because we see it for what it really is.
Whereas on PC, that option is more often than not turned off.
We disable it because it blows, like let's be honest.
The second very important reason why 30 FPS is not the same feeling on PC and console is how you are controlling the game itself. In console we are controlling the game with a controller, whereas in PC we are controlling with a mouse and a keyboard.
What? No, you can literally use a controller on PC as well. The game I'm playing in the background right now, Demon's Souls, I'm using a controller. I could have used a keyboard and mouse if I wanted to, but I sometimes like playing games on PC on controller rather than keyboard. Also, console games literally let you use keyboard now, well some of them anyway. I remember playing Ark on my PS4 and I used to use the keyboard and mouse in that game. In fact, speaking of Ark, here's some Ark gameplay for you. Shout out to Vegas Boy for gifting me this game, by the way, it's pretty fucking cool. But yeah, I've never understood this idea that people like to fling around that nobody on PC uses controller because it's completely untrue.
Now this is a well-known fact that a mouse is much more responsive than a controller.
No, it's not. I've used a controller and a mouse on my computer and they're both just as responsive as each other. I mean, maybe it might be a little bit less responsive on a console because the console has built-in input lag, but I don't know, dude.
Controllers have significant amount of input lag, whereas good quality mouse have extremely low input lag which you cannot even feel.
Yeah, this is just completely untrue. There's a bit of built-in input lag in the console itself, but when it comes to the actual controller, the controller itself has no input lag. The only way a controller can have built-in input lag is if you're using it wirelessly, because wireless things automatically are going to have a little bit of input lag, whether that be a keyboard and mouse or a controller. I mean, I use just a basic DualSense controller on my PC and I feel no input lag.
The third and the final reason comes down to more of an architectural difference between a console and a PC. Consoles are very unified and made for a specific purpose, and all of them containing the same set of hardware.
I mean, that would have been true back in the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 generation, but nowadays, and back in the Xbox One and PS4 generation, that's just untrue. You had the PS4, the PS4 Slim, the PS4 Pro, the Xbox One, the Xbox One S, the Xbox One X. Now you got the PS5, you got the PS5 Pro coming out, you got the Xbox Series X, the Xbox Series S, and some games are even like last generation compatible too, so they gotta make it for the Xbox One, the Xbox One X, the Xbox One S, the Xbox Series X, the Xbox Series S.
There are not many variations to console hardware. All Xboxes are made the same and all PlayStations are made the same as well.
As I just pointed out there with those examples I gave of all the varying Xbox and PlayStations, yeah, this is just completely untrue.
They are made for a specific set of consumer who wants a laid-back plug-and-play system.
Speaking of plug and play, I miss when these consoles were plug and play. I remember back in the day, you could go get a GameCube, plug it in, and you didn't need to connect to the internet, anything like that, you could just turn it on and play. But nowadays, you gotta plug in the system, update the controller, update this, update that, shove your dick in the back of the system, and do all this other bullshit just to get the system working.
PC, on the other hand, is altogether a different kind of a beast. There can be infinite number of permutations and combinations of hardware, so it becomes very challenging task for game developers to develop a software that will run equally on every set of hardware. This brings us to frame time. Since PCs have different combinations of components, the frame time are not always constant. There can be numerous reasons for this. There are various factors that can affect the frame time on a PC. There can be a CPU bottleneck, a RAM bottleneck, or even a storage bottleneck. So a lot of factors can affect the frame time of a game on a PC, which goes a long way in determining how smooth your gameplay experience is actually on a PC. As frame time determines the microstutters that happens in games. Whereas in consoles, since the hardware is more unified and uniform, the frame times are extremely constant, and as a result, they give perfectly smooth experience even on low frame rate of 30.
Yeah, except frame times on console aren't always smooth, and that pretty much brings us to the end of the video. Due to those 3 reasons he thinks 30 FPS on console is smoother, but the thing is, I'm gonna go over all 3 reasons again. First of all, motion blur. You literally have that on PC too, and it's used to hide the fact that the game isn't smooth, not to make it smoother. The second reason is he thinks that added input delay on consoles makes it so that it isn't as noticeable when the game gets more input delay added due to the low frame rate, which is just complete horseshit. Also, he thinks people on PC don't use controller. And the third reason is frame times. He thinks they're consistent on console despite tons of games having really bad frame time. But I don't... Whatever, dude. Alright, I'm probably gonna go drink myself to sleep. No, but in all seriousness, if you guys enjoyed the video, leave a like, leave a comment, because it all helps me in the algorithm, and yeah, peace out.